Albert. Yeah, we can see your
Hey
screen right
guys.
now. Hey, and
Excellent.
of course, the floor is yours now.
All
Tell
right.
us about your experience with Conductor for the DevRel pipelines.
Sure. Thanks everyone for joining this talk. My name is Albert. I am head of DevRel at CelerData. So let me talk a little bit about my project first, and then I'll talk about is our use case and how we solved it with Conductor. So StarRocks, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but basically we're an OLAP database. We're an open source version of Snowflake for all intents and purposes, right? You guys are techies, you guys know. So we compete primarily with Snowflake, Redshift, BigQuery, whatnot. Our spin of it, obviously, is that we're a Linux Foundation project. We use the MySQL protocol, so we're compatible for, if you're very used to MySQL statements from that standpoint. And we do all the things that you would expect from a cloud native OLAP database. Um, Not sure if you're aware, but if you're in the open source world, when you give your project to the Linux Foundation, you can't call yourself that project anymore because those trademarks are actually owned by them now. So StarRocks is our open source project, but CelerData is the company that sponsors that development, right? So this is very common with Apache projects, very common with Linux Foundation projects. So the way we make money is that we are open core. You can download the core engine itself, but if you want to manage service for StarRocks, then you buy something like CelerData. Also, a little bit more about us. Obviously, we're kind of VC funded for 60 million. We're based in Menlo Park. The only key thing I want you to see from this chart is that we've got about 10,000 plus members on our community, and I'll talk a little bit more why that is so important, right? So, long story short, if you've seen a little bit about the database space or the OLAP space, typically Snowflake runs in high single digits to minutes for queries. We're sub-second on petabyte of data. And we don't have the same concurrency problems that typically we max out about 100 or 200 concurrent connections on something like Snowflake or BigQuery or Redshift, and then you basically choke. That's one aspect. The other aspect too is we can do joins. A lot of databases in this market, you have to denormalize everything. If you've ever done database work, it's very painful to denormalize their normal form because that was in OLTP. And then you go in AP and you have to denormalize everything. You have to write all these crazy pipelines from that standpoint. So we don't have to do any of those things. All right. Airbnb uses us. There's a lot of great stories about how they use us in different places, 4,000 dimensions, and we can run it in seconds, if not sub-seconds from that standpoint. All right, so let's go to good stuff. Good stuff is DevRel. So I don't know how much of you guys actually know about DevRel. So developer relations is typically part of the marketing organization. I'm personally a developer. I moved into DevRel out of engineering, and my goal here is to make people aware of our project, right? So that's the top of the funnel, awareness and interest from that. And although we have many, many different measurements, our primary two that we typically measure is growth of the community, and that's through articles, writing articles, speaking events, whatnot. And the other thing that we get measured on is in driving the engagement rate, right? And so this is the thing where we measure things like, oh, how many people post, how many people reply to things, how many people retweet or have a reaction to one of our pieces of content that we have or attend to our events or whatnot, right? And this is a really key measurement because as you can imagine in any single open source project, you want people to keep on coming, right? And as time goes on, people also leave, right? So they leave the project for whatever reason, or they've tried it on out and they're not that interested. And hopefully you get more people who come in than leave. But even when you have people in the community, you want to make sure that they're engaged, right? It can't just be, hey, oh, I joined the community, I'm going to look around, I didn't find anything of interest, right? Ideally what you would like to go do is say, hey, thank you for joining the community. Why did you join our community? Is there anything we can improve in the community to not just improve just the community itself, but also the product itself, right? And so this is a very big problem, right? Typically in DevRel, there are not many of us in an organization, right? And so within my company, within CelerData, because we have 10,000 plus entities that are on out there, right? We got to monitor all of it. And so I have 8 core sources that I monitor. I monitor Twitter, Slack, GitHub, Stack Overflow, Reddit, Medium, LinkedIn, our YouTube channel, right? And the idea here is that across these 8 different sources, I basically have aggregate about 35 different things that I have to monitor. So these are things like, someone messages about an issue with Star Rocks, or they have like a problem with writing queries and joins, or they have an issue with our Apache Iceberg implementation, or they have a problem with, querying data off of Hive, or the materialized views didn't work, or the scaling has different problems, right? So obviously the thing is that as a user, as a community user, you're in all these different places, right? So, you think about it that, as a community person, I just have to monitor my Slack because like anybody who has a problem is just going to talk on Slack. That's not realistic for DevRel, right? Realistically, even for marketing, where you have to go is where the communities are at. So if you're on Stack Overflow, you're not going to go and open an account on our Slack and then message us from that standpoint. No, what you have to go do is that I have to go over to Stack Overflow and monitor issues that might occur from that standpoint, right? And as you can imagine, that it becomes very, very tough for you to scale a few people to monitor, 35 different keywords across 8 different types of sources, right? That's one aspect, just the blocking and tackling of just issues, right? But the other thing too is that one thing is about to go and talk about and maybe, how we can improve the product. But the other thing is that we want to encourage also good behavior in the community itself, right? So when you like star us on GitHub, we want to send you a message to thank you for taking the time to star our project. If you write an article or you make a post about us, good, bad, or ugly, right? I always want to hear everything from that standpoint, personally speaking, right? I want to amplify it. Right? I want to amplify it and say, hey, thank you, George, or thank you, Oliver, or thank you, Viren, for writing a little bit about us, right? And it's an opportunity for us to go and engage. And you've obviously spent time. If someone took the time to write an article or write a post about it, good, bad, or ugly, right? We want to be able to not just know, but also, think it as a way for us to go and improve our product or improve the way that we can go and engage others, right? So I monitor these 35 different keywords, right? I use is a combination of 2 major products, Common Room. Think of Common Room as Salesforce or HubSpot for communities, right? Or for open source projects or things outside of your own 4 walls, right? So I can basically monitor these kind of, 35 different keywords, 8 different sources, and be able to go and get like a customer 360 of that person from that standpoint, right? So I can go and say, hey, this person, David, he originally, saw us on Reddit and then asked questions in Stack Overflow and then moved over to Slack. So I can find this traceability across all these different sources as he moves across these different communities, right? And I can then, contextually look at their questions and see the way they've engaged so that I can answer things like not like someone who doesn't know anything. I can at least go and say, okay, I can understand that you've asked some questions around views and then you went to materialized views and then you're asking now about rollups, right? So I can get an idea of how this person is thinking, right? And then I use Orkes to actually go and glue everything together, right? As you imagine, Orkes is our EAI stack, or Enterprise Application Integration Stack. And so what I need to go and use Orkes for is taking data from those different 35 different, keywords in Common Room, looking at events that I care about, like stars on GitHub, and then I go and then reply back through some other medium. And this could be on Slack, if they're in our Slack channel, or on email, or any other type of mechanism that we have access to. So ideally, from that standpoint, if you say, for instance, liked our post on LinkedIn, I would use Orkes to say, for instance, message you back on LinkedIn, right? That's the ideal scenario from that standpoint, right? All right. So I do have some screenshots from that standpoint if you were curious a little bit more about how it actually works underneath. So Common Room itself, like I mentioned, monitors a bunch of these keywords. In this screenshot I'm showing you is that I can monitor, like, say, for instance, this is our StarRocks GitHub, right? I'm looking for anything with 1 or more stars. I actually can even tailor it to organization size and revenue or geography or whatnot, right? So I can actually put out a bunch of filters in Common Room, and it can go and find me is these events that fit into this criteria. However, Common Room is not that smart from that standpoint, right? All it can go do is it can launch as a webhook, but the webhook doesn't, other than saying that that's contextually what has happened, it doesn't do anything from that. And so the thing is that you have to build more logic into this pipeline. So once the webhook happens, then I go into Orkes, and I need several other things, right? So besides sending the email, which makes it sound easy, right? You also think about it that you have to have is spam logic, right? So as you can imagine, you have to meet towards compliance, right? A lot of email systems don't know this. And so we have to figure that on out. We have primarily our data inside of HubSpot. So I have to pull some data out from HubSpot to see if, like, you want to get spammed or not get spammed. The do not contact. The other thing that Common Room doesn't go and do for me is multi-language. So if I knew geography-wise that this person was from China or from France or Germany, I would rather go and email them in their own language instead of doing a generic webhook to just send a generic message to everybody from that standpoint, right? What is another thing? Inside of Common Room, I can actually figure out they have an ability to actually figure out is your IT title. So I can figure out if you're a manager or an individual contributor. And as you can imagine, is that it does a webhook, but that's it, all right? I have to go inside of Orkes and build out logic that says, if you're a manager, you want to see this type of email or contact. If you're an IC, these are some other things that you might be interested in, right? So those are, that's another branch that you have to figure on out. And also you've got preferences too, right? So not everybody wants to see as an email. They might want it as SMS, or they might want to have a message or whatnot. And so I tell people that, you think about it in a lot of marketing systems, it's not just like, I'm going to just reply off of an event, right? It's more than just that, right? There's a lot of enrichment that happens along the way. So I tried to do this with other tools, and essentially what I came out to is Orkes became the easiest for me to go and achieve this, right? So, I like to put this this slide on up just to give you well, we're all smart engineers, right? So I wanted to give you an idea of what I was looking for in a tool itself, right? If you don't have something like Conductor, Orkes, or something like Common Room, right? You have to, how do you engage 10,000 different people, right? To do all these activities, right? To thank him for the contributions to it, to thank him for helping answer questions out in the community, or say, for instance, even that they bothered to even put is a PR for documentation, right? A pull request for documentation, right? I mean, we can't be everywhere, right? And so, before not having these tools, I'd have to do this all manually. It's very inconsistent. It only is when I have time to go and do that, right? And I can be only at so many places at so many places at one given time. And even for myself, I have a team that helps me from that standpoint. But as you can imagine, this is very, very labor intensive, right? And ultimately, what I wanted to go do is be able to give is the best community to people to say, oh, the best thing about Star Rocks is not just that you guys have an awesome, OLAP database, but you've got a responsive, engaged community, and they do appreciate what I contribute to the community, right? So I even do things like, if you do enough contributions, I automatically send you is a free T-shirt, stuff like that, right? Isn't it cool, right? To be appreciated. And so I mentioned a little bit about some of the required capabilities I needed: automation, flexibility, being able to integrate to a lot of different APIs. As you can imagine, we don't build everything in-house as a startup. We integrate with a lot of different tooling that's out there, right? I needed to also be able to support multi-language. We're a global open source team. We have many committers from all around the world, and many different users from all around the world. And so I needed something to be able to go and handle that type of, global presence. And I mentioned a little bit about success metrics, right? So, my management's always asked me, so Albert, you do all this stuff, what does it mean? And I said, like, well, what we're going to do is we're going to build a strong foundation for us to build our community step by step, brick by brick, and make sure that whatever we can go do is that we don't drop something along the way, right? Before I had even just all this DevRel stuff, I was a developer myself out in the open source community. And, you always do submit PRs, you open GitHub issues, you answer questions in community, and you don't hear from anybody, right? It's like, do you even know that I'm here from that standpoint, right? And so, even though, this is automated now, it is still that, I do take time to go and look at it, and I send beyond the automation. I go and, contact those individuals and have one-on-one conversations, right? So I think of this as automation plus, augmenting myself, just like ChatGPT, just like any of the other generative AI, is that it augments me to do more than what I can do just by myself, right? But it's still my own, right? I write all the messages from that standpoint. I read the messages that I send on out, and I try to go as much as I can to, remember everybody who comes on into my community and make sure that they get answered from that standpoint. I even have automation that tells other engineers that we got to go and, like, this PR or this message hasn't been answered in the community. So all that's basically the what I've done with Orkes and Netflix Conductor. I do have a Medium article that goes into much more technical details about how I actually built it. It's got examples of the JSONs I used. It's got, even when I use the secrets, I used all the pieces that you would have used within the Orkes tooling itself. And if you have time, join my community. You'll see a message from me.
Thank you, Albert. Thanks for this experience. And yes, sure, we have a few questions again here. The first one is, about the integration between Conductor and Common Room, like how this has been made and who feeds who. How did you can you give us a little detail about that part? Because as you said very clearly, Conductor is used in your case as an integration platform that helps you to integrate with all many different sources and systems. So how this particular um, uh, integration has been made?
Yeah, so Common Room has the ability for you to do, like I mentioned, to do a webhook. And so what I did on the Orkes side is that I created as a token so that I can invoke basically the Orkes workflows. And then from that point of view, then I created my workflow for whatever it is, and then it's contacting whatever services that I need. Either it's HubSpot, Sendinblue, which got renamed to something else, and any other service that I needed to go and access. But the initialization point is really a webhook from Common Room.
All right. That's actually something to remind everyone here. Like with Conductor, really a lot of things are very important. We talked with our speakers today about how to design things. We also talked about how to observe things when things have been executed. But as Albert is saying, how to execute, how to make sure that a workflow is executed automatically when something happens in another system. So it can be something scheduled, it can be from a webhook. There are many different ways to execute workflows that are managed by Conductor. So yet another good example. Thank you, Albert.
No problem.